Have you ever found yourself spiraling over a yellow leaf, wondering, is this overwatering or underwatering? Does it need water? Does it need to be left alone? Is this normal? You might be overthinking your plant care and you're not alone. It's something I've done many, many times, and I know it's something that people in our community do all the time. Now, the intention of overthinking plant care is pure. You just want to do it right. You just want to get it correct. However, the problem with overthinking is that it takes the joy out of plant care, right? All of a sudden, you're stressing about doing it right instead of just enjoying the plant that is in front of your eyes. And in 2025, we need as much joy as possible and as little stress as possible. The world will give us our stress. Our plants don't need to give us stress. So let's dive into 5 different ways you might be overthinking plant care and how to fix it. Welcome to the Growing Joy with Plants podcast, where we not only learn how to care for plants successfully, but how to simply and affordably use our plant babies to cultivate more joy in our lives by doing so. I'm Maria, former plant killer turned happy plant lady, author of Growing Joy, the Plant Lover's Guide to Cultivating Happiness, speaker, podcaster, and most importantly, your new best plant friend. On Growing Joy with Plants, you'll find conversations about houseplant care, gardening tutorials, and wellness through the lens of plants. Plant care is self-care on Growing Joy. Hello, my plant friend. I'm Maria. I'm here to help you care for plants and grow joy. If you are a new listener, welcome. And if you are a returning listener, such an honor to be a part of your plant parenthood journey. I really hope this episode gives you a permission slip to not stress too much about plant care. And I was thinking about this episode, and I've realized that if you are coming to this episode because you have been overthinking plant care, you might need a tool to cut through the confusion of plant care, cut through the overwhelm, have a vetted resource to help you understand the basics of plant care and how to use plants as a wellness tool, how to successfully have a thriving plant collection. So I'm going to do a special promotion for just this podcast episode. I'm not talking about it on social media. You will only hear this if you listen to this podcast episode. But if you need extra support and you were considering getting my new digital course, taking you from confused to confident plant parent, it's called Growing Joy with Plants Masterclass. I want to make sure you can get it at a really accessible price. So you can use the code OVERTHINK for $50 off, which will bring it down to $49. So if at the end of this episode, you realize, you know what, I have been overthinking, I do need some support, I want you to make sure you can grab that course for $49. So use the code OVERTHINK. It's like a super secret code just for the people who are listening to this podcast episode, okay? Because I'm here to help you grow joy. I'm here to set you up for success. So in my first couple of years of caring for plants, and what I have certainly noticed as I've spoken to thousands of members of our community, is as we're learning to care for plants, that's when we can second guess ourselves. We all come to this plant care hobby. We all come to plants earnestly looking to have thriving plants. None of us show up to this hobby hoping that our plants are mediocre at best, if not dying, right? We all want the thriving plants that we see on Instagram. And if that doesn't happen, that's when we can start to spin out. And it really can become very stressful. I've had listeners voice memo me in tears because they're scared that they repotted a plant incorrectly. I personally know that I've gone ahead and repotted plants and then wondered, oh, did I just kill that thing? Like, did I just repot incorrectly and like kill it accidentally? So sometimes it makes sense to overthink. Sometimes it makes sense to think those things, right? If you might have made a mistake, but most of the time you're probably overthinking your plant care. So I wanted to go through 5 different signs that point to you overthinking in a way that negatively impacts your plant hobby. And we'll talk about how to kind of course correct so that you stop overthinking and you start growing joy in those moments. This is kind of inspired by our recent episode on mindset shifts in plant care that did so well. So I'm going to start bringing more of these mindset towards plant care episodes to make sure that not only are you supported in having all of the information you need to care for plants successfully, but also to care for your brain successfully as you move through caring for plants. So we'll go through the 5 different signs, and then we'll also talk about how to fix them. So sign number 1 is that you are spending a lot of time on Google. And believe me, when I was a beginner plant parent and I was a plant killer and I didn't know anything, I was Googling everything too. And now they have ChatGPT, which makes it so much easier as well, right? So when you see that yellow leaf, you get onto Google and you think, you type in yellow leaf, but then all of a sudden that makes it worse because overwatering can bring yellow leaves, underwatering can bring yellow leaves, low light can bring yellow leaves, and you don't know which one is right. So you earnestly show up to Google to try and get your answer. But oftentimes when it's very specific plant care advice that you need, Google ends up confusing you more than helping you, right? And obviously, I'm not saying don't look for answers. You obviously need answers to your questions. You need to figure out if that yellow leaf is just a natural part of your plant's processes. By the way, yellow leaves can be totally normal and you just remove them and get on with your life. Or it might be a symptom pointing towards a bigger issue. So instead of going to Google, instead of relying on unvetted plant care advice, you don't know who it's coming from, you don't know who wrote the article, you don't know if it's right, you don't know if it's wrong, I wanted to give you some better resources to research with. So number one, I would start a collection of plant care books from authors that you trust. So I have a vintage collection of plant care books from the 70s, which I love. And then I also have some plant care books from the last couple of years by horticulturists and plant care experts that really know what they're talking about. And instead of Googling, I will go to those books, right? Because if you think about it, I get approached for blogs that get written about plant care all the time. And often it's not plant people. It's like it's a journalist who has an assignment to write an article for a website. I don't know, like a random home design website. And the journalist doesn't know about plants. So they reach out to experts, but they don't even know how to vet the experts, right? And the journalists themselves don't know about plants. So oftentimes, if you're reading articles from people who aren't vetted, it can really become a problem. And that's where you see advice like misting your plants for humidity, which, by the way, that's a horrible piece of advice. Misting can increase fungal problems with your plants and won't increase your humidity. But anyway, I digress. So I would find a couple of people that you have vetted to follow them on Instagram, read their blogs, whatever, turn to them for advice and or start collecting some books from people who wrote the books that you trust that you refer to for advice instead. Because let me tell you, when you publish a book, I have published a book. Usually there are horticultural editors that have to go through it and make sure everything in that book is correct before it goes to publishing, right? So the chances that you're going to get better quality advice from a book as compared to a blog is important. Now, this is interesting, right? Because I'm a podcaster and I create free content and I'm like, buy a book. But also when it comes to consuming free content, I would just vet whoever you're getting your free advice from. When it comes to me, I've done almost 300 hours of podcast interviews on horticulture. I've taken plant science courses. I've taken soil science courses, spoken to 1,000 of you. I've been caring for plants for 8 years, right? So like, I know what I'm talking about. I'm really confident in that. If you consume content for me, it's going to be correct. Not everyone on the internet is like that, right? So when it comes to content creators, when it comes to other podcasts or other YouTubers or whatever, just like give them a Google, see how long they've been caring for plants. See if they have taken any courses. See if they're a horticulturist before you kind of double down and start accepting their advice. And once again, like this is all just best practices. Obviously, we're all going to follow who we follow and consume what we consume. But I want to make sure that I can help train you with like a weary eye so you understand, so you don't get duped on the internet. I see a lot of people getting duped on the internet and it kind of breaks my heart. Now, the other thing is trust your own observations, right? So when we come back to the yellowing leaves, you can Google yellowing leaves and you'll get overwatered and underwatered as a result. But go to your personal observations and think, okay, when was the last time I watered this plant? Was it yesterday? That's probably going to be more of an overwatered situation. Did I not water this plant for 3 weeks? Okay, that's an underwatered situation, right? So oftentimes you don't even need to Google if you just like sit and be present with yourself for a minute and think, okay, let me be a super sleuth. Like, let me become my own detective for a minute and figure that out. Your plant will tell you what you need. And in my Growing Joy with Plants Masterclass, my digital course, we have a whole lesson on reading your plants for signs and symptoms. So like reading your plants for cues to find out when to water them, reading your plants to see how and if they're kind of going downhill. And we have that lesson. And then we also have a common houseplant problems lesson. Both of those lessons, I give you, how to identify, but it's a lot of figuring out with your own context. So that's number one. Number two is watering on a rigid schedule and believing plant care cards. So I have nothing against plant care cards. I think plant care cards are awesome. They're really helpful, particularly when you're plant shopping and you don't know the plant that you're buying. However, if we both have a snake plant and the plant care card says to water it once a week, and I bring my snake plant home and I put it in super high light, and you bring your snake plant home and you put it in super low light, I am going to need to water my snake plant in high light way faster than you're going to have to water your snake plant, right? So these care card recommendations are based off of like, what is the most general recommendation that we can make that makes sense for the largest population of the community of people buying? But that's maybe 90%, right? So there's going to be 10% of people who that doesn't quite apply to. So take care card advice with a grain of salt. So also a big prescriptive thing that people say is have a day that you water and water your plants every Sunday, right? Have Sunday be your watering day, and once a week you just go through and water all your plants. I don't agree with that. I think you should have a check-in day with your plants, and every Sunday you can do a lap around your house, check in with all your plants, but instead of just going and watering, you should be touching the soil with your finger or using a moisture meter and figuring out if that plant actually needs to be watered. Because in general, you should never be watering wet soil, okay? Wet soil, damp soil does not need to be watered. Usually, for most houseplants, and this isn't ferns or Marantaceae or anything like that, but for most houseplants, you're letting like your top knuckles worth of soil dry out before you go in and water again. So, and you might have to water more frequently in the spring and summer and less in the winter. Or if you're like me, when I lived in upstate New York, I had to water more in the winter because I had such intense heat in my house, right? So the when you have to water your plants is going to change seasonally and just based on how much you watered the last time. So I wouldn't recommend watering on a rigid schedule. And frankly, I would recommend taking the word rigid out of everything you do with houseplants. This is not a rigid hobby. Baking is a rigid hobby. You have to measure exactly a third of a teaspoon or exactly this or exactly that. Houseplant care isn't. We're growing. We're blooming. We're growing. We're dying back. We're changing. We're becoming fenestrated. Things change, right? So rigidity in any aspect of plant care kind of harshes the vibe. So I would say remove that from your vocabulary as you approach your plant care. Now, I really think that plant care is no longer intuitive anymore because so many of us are disconnected from plants and disconnected from nature. But my goal with this podcast and with my new digital course is to help close the gap between what you don't know and that like disconnection to being connected again so that you can intuitively water. When I walk through my plant collection, I intuitively know who needs watering and who doesn't, even without touching the soil. Because I'm so connected to my plants at this point, I just like know based off of vibes and based off of my intuition. Now, I'm always still going to touch the soil and make sure the plant needs water. But as you kind of turn away from this habit of overthinking, you're also going to turn towards your own intuition and your own self and your own relationship with these plants, which will reap so many rewards in your future. If you don't want to do the finger test, so sticking your finger in the soil and then taking it out, even though I highly recommend this because it's a wonderful way to engage multiple senses at once with your plants, you can also do the pickup test. So pick the plant up before you water it and notice how light the pot is, and then water it and then pick the plant up again. So you'll know how heavy that pot is with fully saturated soil versus unsaturated soil. So then you can just walk through your plant collection and pick the pots up. And by the volume, the weight of the pot, you'll over a period of time, start to know whether or not that plant needs to be watered just by how heavy the pot is. And if you're a true beginner, I do recommend getting a moisture meter. Moisture meters are not something I use anymore, but when I was a beginner, it was really fun to get a moisture meter and stick it in the soil and see, how moist the soil was in the top inch and then plunge it deeper into the pot and then see how moist the soil was like 3 inches below, right? So we have recommendations in our houseplant first aid kit on my Amazon storefront if you want a moisture meter, but that's a great tool for a beginner if watering still really freaks you out. And by the way, if watering freaks you out, we do have an entire module with 4 different lessons on watering and growing joy with plants masterclass. Okay, so we're talking about yellow leaves a lot because I feel like that's just what people write me about a lot. But number 3 is going to be panicking about every single yellow leaf. So the minute you see a yellow leaf, like you start to freak out. That's when you start to Google. That's when you start to water. That's when you start to like do all these things. Yellow leaves are part of houseplant parenthood. Houseplants get yellow leaves and it's totally fine. And you just remove them and let them go, right? Now, yellow leaves can also point towards symptoms of problems, but just like our hair falls out kind of like naturally, like you lose a certain amount of hair every day, like it's normal for certain old leaves to yellow and die. And when it yellows, the plant pulls back all the energy before it dies, and then you can just remove it and move on with your day. I wouldn't say you should leave yellow leaves on your plant once they're fully yellow because you want the plant to be sending its energy to its new leaves. But just when you see a yellow leaf, you can take a breath before you start to freak out because it might just be natural. So I have a pothos in front of me on the other side of the camera as I record this podcast. It's one of my oldest plants to date. And I noticed that it has one yellow leaf on it. But the pothos, the plant itself, is actually super happy. The leaves are perky. I watered it this week. It's doing really well. It's putting off new growth. So I'm just going to remove that yellow leaf. That yellow leaf just probably has spent its time on earth and is ready to go and return to the soil, right? So I'm not going to stress about it. No matter what climate you are growing in, you should be using Espoma Organic as your go-to soil and fertilizer brand. Espoma Organic is a 90-year-old family-owned and operated company dedicated to making safe indoor and outdoor gardening products for people, pets, and the planet. Espoma offers high-quality options for your indoor and outdoor plant collections. Start your seeds in their seed starting mix. Plant those starts up in your garden with their Biotone Starter Plus plant food that helps your plants grow larger root mass, helps them establish faster, helps reduce transplant loss. I can't tell you, I planted 2 planters, one with Biotone and one without, and the difference in the quality of plants and how lush they are is staggering. You can also use their large array of garden soils, composts, and potting mixes for whatever container or bed you're gardening in and whatever plants you're growing, and feed them with their line of fertilizers called tones. They have a tone, a specific fertilizer for every single type of plant you could imagine growing. And if you're a houseplant parent, like me, keep it simple with their general potting mix for your houseplants and use their liquid indoor houseplant food. You pour it right into your watering can. It makes fertilizing your houseplants so easy. And to top it all off, they have a huge sustainability commitment with 100% solar-powered plant, zero waste manufacturing, and eco-friendly packaging. To learn more about their indoor and outdoor products, visit espoma.com to see where your local Espoma dealers are, or click the link in the show notes to go to my curated list of Espoma favorites on Amazon. Thanks, Espoma. Now, if my pothos had 1 yellow leaf and then I noticed 2 days later it had 2 more yellow leaves, and then I noticed 3 days later it had 3 more yellow leaves, and I know that I had just watered the plant, then I think, I think I might have overwatered this plant accidentally, and then take action from there. Why I also recommend removing yellow leaves when you see it is because then all of a sudden you can track. So right now, after I record this podcast, I'm going to remove the yellow leaf on my pothos and then keep my eye on it, because then I know that leaf is gone. So I have a fully green plant. If more yellow leaves turn up this week, then I'm going to start troubleshooting. But probably it won't, because it's a very happy plant, getting plenty of light, living its best life. So I would say, before you rush to fix anything, take a beat, think about the context in which the plant is currently existing, and then go ahead and execute something. Now, tip number 4 is actually tethered to tip number 3. So tip number 3 is don't freak out about every yellow leaf. Tip number 4 is don't throw the kitchen sink at an issue all at once. So when I see a yellow leaf, I might think, I've got to water the plant, and I've got to increase the light, and I've got to spray it down with neem oil, and I've got to do all of these things. But when you do too many things to a plant at once, you can't track what it actually was. So you won't have an answer of what the problem was, because you're throwing so many things at it that you're not going to know what made it feel better. And you might actually be doing things that could hurt it, right? So in watering it, you might end up overwatering it. People say, you shouldn't move your plant around every couple of weeks. Sometimes when people bring a plant home from the nursery, they really want to make sure it's doing well. So they'll move a plant all around their house, every couple of days or every couple of weeks. So that plant never gets to truly adjust, and it's not establishing. And when you move something around too many times, it actually, if you did that to a ficus, it would hate that. Ficuses don't like getting moved around too much. They're going to drop all of their leaves because they're very sensitive. So I would say only do one remedy at a time, see if that remedy works, and then keep going. Not to say that you don't have the other remedies ready in your back pocket, but see what's working first. So if you want to change the light, just change the light of your plant and don't change anything else. If you want to spray it down with neem oil, see if the neem oil works, if it's a pest or whatever, You want to make a change, see how it responds, and then tweak based off of that response. Does that make sense? And then last but not least, you think that you have to be a perfect plant parent, and that if you are anything less than a perfect plant parent, you are a bad plant parent. Take that thought out of your brain. That is a weed in your brain that needs to be weeded. You need to weed the negative thought of I'm a bad plant parent, and you need to plant the seed of I'm doing great and there's always room for improvement and learning. Okay. I have canceled the term perfection from my plant collection, from my business, from all of my relationships, from everything in my life, because striving for perfection is so exhausting and I'm so over it. And the issue with all of us being on social media and seeing all of these beautiful images of plants on Pinterest and all of the beautiful images of plants on Instagram and all of the beautiful images of plants everywhere, it gives such a high standard of perfection that is so hard to achieve. And also, like all of these perfect plants, you know that maybe there's a yellow leaf, but it's not showed in the photo because the person taking the photo turned the pot just so the best leaf was showing, right? Photoshop happens, filters happen. And sometimes when you strive for perfection, you miss it. You miss the whole dang thing, plant friend, right? Because if you're agonizing over the 1 or 2% that it could be better, you're missing out on the fact that you got a 98%. And I'm so guilty of this. I'm an Aries. I'm like a first child. I'm all of those things, like 6'2" projector on the human design scale. Like I'm all of those things. I have such a high level of excellence that I strive for. But what I've realized is you really like miss the journey when you shoot for the destination. So instead, enjoy the ride, enjoy the growth. We're growing plants to grow. We're growing plants to witness their growth. And when you grow plants, there are going to be problems that arrive. It's not if, it's when you're going to get a pest. It's not if, it's when you're going to have a yellow leaf. It's not if, it's when you're going to deal with a fungal infection. Those are all okay. But in those moments, isn't it more fun to just be like, oh yeah, okay, let's be flexible. I see we have this problem. Let's adjust it, than to like totally beat yourself up because it's not your level of perfection. Now, just like you, I want beautiful houseplants. I want a home filled with thriving houseplants that makes everyone drool and be jealous of me, right? That's why I'm recording this podcast with this epic green wall behind me. But when I underwater accidentally, when I've kind of left a plant that I needed to treat for pests one extra day than I should have, I give myself grace. And I hope you do too. Because like I said in the beginning of this episode, there's a lot of things in our world right now to make us stressed. On a societal level, on a personal level, we all have our own problems that we struggle with. And plants are supposed to be something that brings us joy. Plants are supposed to be something that improves our life, makes us smile, makes us experience awe, makes us proud, helps us build confidence, right? And if your plants aren't doing those things for you, then it is time for a mindset shift. And it is time to evaluate your approach to plant care that you are potentially overthinking and kind of give yourself a little adjustment, because plants are resilient and plants evolve. And so do we. Isn't that cool? So enjoy the journey. I have a holiday cactus blooming on my green wall right now. And I have celebrated that cactus and the blooms on that cactus every freaking day. Every day when I come to my desk, I look at those blooms and I like smile at them and say thank you. And they bring me so much joy. The plant next to that cactus has like a weird leaf burn thing next to it. Am I freaking out about it? No, I'm going to move the plant so it's farther away from my grow light, but I'm not going to let the leaf burn detract from the fact that I have a beautiful plant blooming in my home, right? It's all mindset. So when it comes to how to really release these overthinking habits and really step into a more relaxing and joyful relationship with your plants and plant care routine, number one, all about trusting your intuition. Before you go Google, before you start freaking out, ask yourself, can I troubleshoot this myself? What do I really think here? What are my context clues that can help me make an educated decision? And if not, where am I going to turn that sets me up for success in those books, maybe in my digital course, wherever, whatever is your answer, but just have like a calm resource that you can turn towards so it doesn't become this like crazy overthinking spiral, right? Create a simple and flexible routine around your plant care that tosses the word rigid out the window. Once a week at least, if not once every couple of days, be walking through your plants, singing to them, smiling to them. If they need water, water them. If they don't need water, don't. If you want to engage with them, clean their leaves, look for pests, rotate their pots. There's plenty of things that you can do that are not watering your plants. And keep it fluid, keep it flowy, right? You want to just accept that plant losses are going to be part of the game. So if you go into plant parenthood thinking everything's going to be perfect and you are always going to have beautiful plants, you're setting yourself up for failure when it comes to overthinking and stressing. Just know that plant issues are going to be part of your journey. Like I said, it's not if, it's when the first pest arrives. It's not if, it's when you have a yellow leaf. And it's all good. It's all part of it. So if you can just greet it neutrally and say, oh, okay, this is what we have going on today, and then move forward from this neutral place, instead of immediately, spinning out, you're going to have such a more enjoyable experience. And last but not least, I just invite you to find joy. Find joy in your fails. Find joy in your imperfections. Find joy in your yellow leaves. Find gratitude in those yellow leaves. Every time you feel yourself going to overthink, think, how could I make this fun? How could I make this joyful? How could I enjoy this more? And for each of us, that's going to look different. But just ask yourself, how can I sprinkle a little bit more joy onto this moment for myself? So stop Googling every little thing. I totally understand, but you've got this and you can observe instead. Ditch the word rigid. Don't panic over yellow leaves. Give your plant time to adjust. Don't be throwing the kitchen sink at it, getting all crazy, and let go of perfection. And if you do these 5 things, you will have such a more joyful 2025 when it comes to your houseplants. I promise you, it will be so much more fun. I can't wait to hear about it. I can't wait to hear how much fun you're having. Okay, plant friends? So if, any of these really have popped out to you, been like, oh yeah, I'm struggling with that. If you want to go grab Growing Joy with Plants Masterclass, I do want to offer only the people listening to this particular episode the launch offer for the course. So that's going to be using code. So you'll go with growingjoywithmaria.com/masterclass. It'll be linked in the show notes, and you can use the code OVERTHINK, and it'll bring that course down for you for $49. Because if you're struggling with this, I really want to make sure that you're set up for success. I really want 2025 to be your best year of plant parenthood yet. And I really want to make sure that you have this digital course at your fingertips if you need, for the price of a plant. It has everything you need to cut through confusion. It has everything you need to not get overwhelmed, because all you'll do is go to the course, go to the downloads, go to the lessons, and have your answers there. I hope you enjoyed this more mindset-minded episode. Let me know if there are other topics when it comes to approach to plant care that you want me to do an episode on. I hope it helps. I hope you have the most joyful year of plant parenthood yet. I hope you give yourself the permission, write yourself a permission slip to not stress about this anymore this year, okay? I love you. You're doing so great. I'm so proud of you. And I hope that this episode and every episode of Growing Joy with Plants helps you keep growing joy. Plant friend, thank you for tuning in today. It means so much to me that I get to be part of your planty journey. If you like what you heard, make sure you're subscribed to the show so you never miss an episode. We have so many incredible interviews and solo episodes on incredible houseplant and gardening topics that you will not want to miss this year. And while you're over there in the podcast player subscribing, why don't you click over to the review section of Growing Joy with Plants and leave us a review. Reviews are tremendously helpful for the growth of the podcast, so thanks in advance. If you're looking for more opportunities to grow as a plant parent with Growing Joy content, we've got so many options for you. First, I highly recommend you taking the Plant Parent Personality Test. It's free, it's super fun, it takes 3 minutes to complete. At the end of the test, you're going to get your plant parent personality profile and a curated list of plants, projects, and podcast episodes that are right up your alley, tailored just for you and your lifestyle, inspired by your results. The links are in the show notes. If you're looking to uplevel your plant parent game, I have so many free downloads on my website that I think could help you, like the Understanding Natural Light download or 9 different ways to green up your office space. If you'd like to support the show monetarily and help me bring the show to as many people as possible for free, you can head to our Patreon link in the show notes to learn more about our offerings. And finally, I invite you to come hang out with me and continue the planty conversation on social media, on Instagram and TikTok. I'm Growing Joy with Maria. My DMs are always open if you have requests for topics or ideas for the show. Thank you again for listening. It is truly my honor and delight to help you keep blooming and keep growing joy.